What if Kurtis Blow joined Rage Against the Machine? Find out on this week's festive What If, How, When, Why. Hello, my name's Morgan Brown, and for the past few months I've been making a series of music videos that I call What If videos. The idea of these is that each week I pick a popular song and imagine an alternative universe in which a change of circumstances or a decision that someone's made caused that song to come out completely differently from the version that we know and love. I then take the original lead vocal of that song and record a new backing track to it using just GarageBand and whatever instruments I have to hand in order to bring that alternative version to life. So this week the song I chose was Christmas Rappin by Kurtis Blow, and I tried to imagine how that would sound if he'd recorded it with Rage Against the Machine as his band. So if you haven't had a chance to listen to that yet, here's a little taster.
Now I'm the guy named Kurtis Blow, and Christmas is one thing I know. So every year, just about this time, I celebrate it with a ride. But a red suited dude with a friendly attitude and a sleeve full of goodies for the people on the block. Got a long white beard, maybe looks kind of good if you ever see him, he can give me quite a shot. Now the people in the back, if you're not the whack, say. The people in the front, if you want the bump, say.
So Kurtis Blow was a very, very important figure in early hip-hop, and I kind of feel like these days when people are talking about the roots of hip-hop, it doesn't come up as often as some of the other kind of seminal figures in that genre. I mean, you always hear about DJ Kool Herc, Grandmaster Flash, but Kurtis Blow doesn't always get so much of a mention. He was really pretty groundbreaking in his day. Certainly the first rapper to be signed to a major label. I mean, Christmas Rappin', the song that I chose for this week's video, one of the first major hip-hop hits back in the Christmas of 1979. So yeah, so much of what became accepted as the norm in hip-hop was pioneered by Kurtis Blow on those early records. His second major hit, The Breaks, which is obviously a play on word around the breaks you get in life, and then the idea of a break beat, one of which features prominently in the song, really, really influential and sampled a lot as well. And his whole style was clearly a massive influence on the likes of Run DMC, who then went on to influence everyone else in hip-hop going forward into the 80s. Aside from that, going right back to his first album in 1980, probably the first rapper to actually attempt to cross over into rock in a bizarre way. The last track of that first album is a cover of Taking Care of Business by Barkman Turner Overdrive, but unlike later crossover attempts where people would just take a guitar riff or the chorus of a rock song and then kind of rap the verses, he actually sings the verse, just writes his own lyrics and sings it, which is kind of fun and goofy, not necessarily what you'd think of as a rap rock crossover, but he was already thinking ahead to a time when that kind of crossover could be achieved, which is pretty forward looking in 1979, when most people were just kind of rapping over breaks from disco or funk records. This is, 6 years before Aerosmith Run DMC. And then as his career went on, he introduced elements of social commentary, which obviously was going to become a big thing as rap got more conscious going through the 80s. Did some more kind of genre crossover stuff, working with George Clinton, the funk pioneer, and members of Trouble Funk, the great go-go band. So always looking for ways to expand the music, always looking for ways to branch out. Unfortunately, as is so often the case with rappers from that first wave, his style was still very much in that sort of sing-song, simple rhymes, and a very regular, almost nursery rhyme-like flow, which you hear on everything from the Sugar Hill Gang through Run DMC, through to even like the first Public Enemy album, still got a bit of that. But obviously, once you get sort of past the mid-80s, you start to get people like Eric B. and Rakim start releasing records, Big Daddy Kane, and all of a sudden there's a new high watermark of what a rapper's flow's got to be like. So much more intricate style, changing up flows, different rhyme schemes, the level of wordplay and the complexity of the imagery that's being used in there. The expectations just go through the roof, and like a lot of earlier rappers, Kurtis couldn't really keep up with that, so his career notably falls off into the late 80s, and then obviously he's cropped up in various places since then, and he's rightly revered for his pioneering role in the genre, but never really kind of recovered those early 80s highs. So rapid really was the evolution of hip-hop that it's mad to think that there were only 12 years between Kurtis Blow releasing his first record and then the emergence of Rage Against the Machine, who are playing this music that's obviously hip-hop derived, but it's so far removed from where the music was when it first started appearing on record. So like a lot of people my age, Rage Against the Machine were obviously a pretty important part of my teenage years. Just a really exciting combination of hip-hop, metal, hardcore. They sounded explosive, they were furious, they had political bite, which as someone who was just starting to develop the very beginnings of a political consciousness was really important, really eye-opening. And then as I started to get into punk, that obviously developed further. But Rage Against the Machine was one of the first bands who opened a lot of people's eyes to a lot of issues and injustices that were happening in the world at the time. Obviously they didn't emerge from a vacuum, that there are precursors to what they were doing. In a way, you can trace the combination of rock guitars and rap right the way back to Kurtis Blow's Taking Care of Business, through Aerosmith Run DMC. But then as the 80s go on, you get harder edged collaborations, the obvious one being Anthrax Public Enemy. But even before that, Public Enemy were already sampling Angel of Death by Slayer on She Watched Channel Zero, which is an absolutely killer track. And then obviously the big one would be the Beastie Boys, who actually started out as a hardcore punk band in the New York scene of the early 80s, released the Pollywog Stew EP back in maybe 81. I could be wrong, I'll check that. But that's just a 7-inch EP of these furious, goofy, but raging hardcore punk songs, and that's pretty awesome. But then, obviously, they established themselves as a rap act, and obviously that first album famously includes rock guitars alongside their hip-hop stylings, so you get Kerry King from Slayer cropping up on there. And then as their career goes on, they not only develop a more sophisticated hip-hop style, but they also reintroduce elements of their kind of hardcore punk roots as well into that. So obviously the Beastie Boys are an important precursor to what Rage were doing. So they're just taking elements of that, elements of the political rage of Public Enemy, and then combining it with the kind of hardcore and post-hardcore of the era, and then crushing metallic riffs, which really have a proper kind of 70s feel to them. There's massive elements of Zeppelin and Sabbath in there as well. And then obviously Tom Morello with his armory of guitar tricks, which he uses to mimic DJ scratching and fader cutting, just to give it that hip-hop feel without actually having to have a DJ like later rap metal bands often did. So it's a really exciting sound. I've seen some people try and claim Rage Against the Machine as a new metal band. I'm not having that. I think it's a bit unfair in a way to blame Rage Against the Machine for new metal. If anything, spiritually, they belong more to hardcore than they do to new metal. But without Rage, there's probably no Limp Bizkit or Kid Rock, God help us. But I don't want to blame them for that. That's just an unfortunate spin-off. But those records, particularly the first two albums for me, those were really kind of key albums for me growing up, and I do love them. A band that explosive never seemed destined for sort of a real longevity. So after, I guess, 3 studio albums and then the covers record as well, Renegades, things get a bit tense and Zach De La Rocha moves on and the rest of them stick together but form Audio Slave with Chris Cornell. So my thought for this week's alternative universe scenario that forms the basis of my track was, what if there's an alternative universe where, as Rage have been touring, maybe Kurtis Blow turns up, takes in a show, gets to meet the band backstage, and they're really happy to see him because obviously he's a revered elder statesman of hip-hop, and they really hit it off. And then when they part ways with Zach De La Rocha, Kurtis Blow gets back in touch and says, I heard your single left. I don't suppose you guys would fancy trying to make some music together? And they think, yeah, why not? Okay, we'll give it a try. They bring him in and it works surprisingly well. So they go out on the road, play some shows. It's going really well. In order to avoid legal action for using the Rage Against the Machine name, they've been hilariously renamed Blow Against the Machine. They get coaxed into re-recording Christmas Rappin' as a Christmas single, and that's how we get this Rage Against the Machine style version of that Christmas classic. So yeah, Christmas Rappin' is an amazing song if you've ever heard the original. I first heard it on some 100 hits of Christmas compilation quite a few years ago and was just blown away by it because it's hilarious. Not a song that kind of crops up particularly in the UK around Christmas time very often. I don't know if it's different in the States. Do let me know down in the comments. I'd love to know. 8 minutes long and some change, I think. Absolutely mad. The actual song itself, the part of the song that's the story, is only really about the first 2.5 minutes, where he's rapping the story about being at a house party and Santa coming in and being invited down to the party. And then obviously Kurtis Blow still being kind of very much like the party MC. The rest of it is just, I guess his role is to keep people on the dance floor. So it's crowd call and response stuff and getting people to put their hands in the air and wave them like they just don't care. All that business, which is really good fun. For my version, I thought there's no way I'm doing all 8 minutes of this into this style, so I fairly savagely cut it down into just the story bit. Also, originally the record's just pretty much one long flow. There's no chorus, it just keeps going, he just keeps flowing. I decided we really need a chorus here. I need the sort of quiet simmering verses and then the explosive choruses. So I took one of the sort of crowd call and response bits from later on in the record and turned that into a makeshift chorus that crops up a few times during it. After I'd synced the vocal onto GarageBand and cut it down to the bit I was going to use, slowed the tempo quite a lot, because although there are a bunch of up-tempo Rage Against the Machine songs, I really wanted this one to have that weighty kind of mid-tempo feel to really contrast with the original and to give it that metallic power. So we've got the vocal on there. The next thing was the drums, so I went for the heaviest kind of drum sound. I wanted to get that almost Zeppelin-y kind of feel that you get with the drums on Rage Against the Machine's records. Brad Wilk. But the bass, I couldn't do anything to make my bass sound like a Tim Comerford. It just wasn't happening. He's got that sort of big Music Man Stingray kind of humbuckery tone. And he's an amazing player, like really great fingerstyle player. I'm awful at playing bass fingerstyle. I tried to play it the right way to keep it authentic, but didn't really sound anything like it. So just beefed up the sound as much as I could. A bit of overdrive on there. And then guitar-wise, I started out by just popping a couple of rhythm guitars on. I came up with a couple of guitar riffs that I just wanted to base the song around in the 70s heavy rocky kind of vein that you tend to expect from Rage Against the Machine. I know that Tom Morello's main two guitars for Rage were just the Telecaster and the Arm the Homeless Super Strat. So to try and at least represent those sounds a bit, I used my homemade Telecaster on one side with the neck pickup, which I know is what Tom Morello tended to use. And then my Washburn Super Strat on the other side. I don't think I've ever shown you that. I meant to have it to hand, but I haven't got it on me at the moment. I'll pop a little photo up at some point just to show you 80s monstrosity that it is. So we've got those two rhythm guitars on each side, just playing the riff and just setting the dynamics of the track, really. And then I really wanted to try and get some of those trademark Tom Morello effects in there as well, for which I needed a guitar with a kill switch. Luckily, my Epiphone SG, which I think I showed in one of these videos a few weeks ago, I removed the neck pickup of that, so the pickup switch now works as a kill switch. So I used that for a few different effects. As it turns out, they're quite tricky, these things. So yeah, trying to do them with any degree of accuracy, trying to get that coordination. I don't know why I thought I'd be able to just pick them up and do them perfectly first off, but I couldn't. So it took quite a bit of editing to get them to sound even semi-presentable. But, you know, at least it sounds a little bit like what it's supposed to be. The isolated vocal that I used is really messy isolation. I think part of the problem is that the original record's got a lot of party atmosphere kind of crowd noise on it, and whichever program's been used to try and separate out that vocal has had trouble separating it from the crowd noise, so it's really messy, kind of thin sounding. So just added some overdrive to that to just try and thicken up that vocal and make it sound a bit gnarlier. Also, just try and make it sound a little bit more aggressive, because Kurtis Blow is not a tough sounding rapper. He sounds like a nice guy, and obviously with the Rage Against the Machine thing, you wanted to make it sound just a little bit more aggressive. Don't think I really managed that, but had a go. And then for the video, managed to find one clip of Kurtis back in the day performing the track, although it turned out that the track that he was lip syncing to was quite heavily edited in a different way to how I'd edited it, so certain lines just don't appear at all, so had to work my way around that. blended that in with some festival footage of Rage from back in the 90s, and then also managed to find some footage of some folks dressed up as Santa and the Elves doing a hip-hop style dance routine, which I thought went pretty well with the overall theme of the track. So blended that in as well, and hopefully the whole thing comes together as some sort of festive delight. But yeah, let me know what you think down in the comments. I always appreciate hearing from you. And if there are any non-Christmas related songs that you'd like me to take on in the new year, any artists you'd like me to look at, any songs you'd like me to check out, or any styles you'd like me to try my hand at, always welcome your suggestions. And please do like and subscribe. I always appreciate anything that just helps me to grow the channel. It's always great. That's all for me from this week. So I hope you have a really happy Christmas. I'll be back next week with a New Year special, so look out for that as well. And until then, thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.